France entered the Second World War with an air force caught between generations, capable machines, capable men, and a rearmament program that ran out of time. What follows covers every significant aircraft that flew under French authority from 1939 to 1945. The Morane-Saulnier MS.406. The MS.406 was France's most numerous fighter when the war began, a monoplane of modest performance, powered by a Hispano-Suiza inline engine reaching around 490 kilometers per hour. It was maneuverable but underpowered, and its armament of 1 cannon and 2 machine guns was adequate rather than formidable. Against the Bf-109E, it was outclassed in speed and climb. It fought with determination over France in 1940 and later served with Vichy, Finnish, and other air forces. The Dewoitine D-520. The D-520 was the finest French fighter available in meaningful numbers during the Battle of France. Powered by a Hispano-Suiza 12Y engine, it reached around 535 kilometers per hour and carried 1 20mm cannon and 4 machine guns. It could meet the Bf-109E on more equal terms than any other French type. Introduced too late and in too few numbers, it fought well, claimed genuine victories, and went on to serve with Vichy forces in Syria and North Africa before eventually equipping Free French units. The Bloch MB-152. The MB-152 was a stocky, robust monoplane fighter that entered service just before the German offensive. Powered by a Gnome-Rhone radial engine, it reached approximately 510 kilometers per hour and carried 2 cannon and 2 machine guns. Early production suffered from quality control problems that limited availability. Those that flew in May and June 1940 proved reasonably capable in combat, but delivery delays meant that many sat unassembled when they were most needed. The Curtiss H-75 Hawk. France purchased the American Curtiss H-75 Hawk as a supplement to domestic production. Powered by a Wright Cyclone radial, it reached around 500 kilometers per hour and proved highly effective in French hands. French pilots flying the H-75 achieved an impressive kill ratio against Luftwaffe opponents during the Battle of France. After the armistice, it served with Vichy forces and in the Finnish Air Force, where it continued to perform well against Soviet opposition. The Bloch MB-174. The MB-174 was a twin-engine reconnaissance and light bomber aircraft of exceptional performance for its category. Clean, fast, and well-built, it could reach speeds near 530 kilometers per hour, making it difficult to intercept. It served the Armée de Mer's reconnaissance units during the Battle of France, providing intelligence under conditions where slower aircraft would have been lost. Its speed was its armor, and in that respect it succeeded where more conventional designs could not. The Potez 63 series. The Potez 63 family was a versatile twin-engine design that served in multiple roles: fighter, reconnaissance, and light attack. The various subvariants carried different armament and equipment configurations depending on their intended mission. Powered by 2 Gnome-Rhone or Hispano-Suiza engines, the family reached speeds between 420 and 470 kilometers per hour, depending on variant. It was widely used and widely lost during the 1940 campaign, suffering heavily from both air combat and ground attack by advancing German forces. The Lioré and Olivier LEO-451. The LEO-451 was the most capable French medium bomber of the period, a twin-engine design of modern construction that reached approximately 495 kilometers per hour, fast enough to complicate interception attempts. Armed defensively and capable of carrying a meaningful bomb load, it represented the best of French bomber design. It entered service just as the campaign began and flew missions against German positions in France and the Low Countries. After the armistice, it served with Vichy air forces across North Africa and the Middle East. The Amiot 354. The Amiot 354 was a sleek, twin-engine bomber that demonstrated what French industry could produce when a design was allowed to mature. Fast and aerodynamically refined, it reached speeds near 480 kilometers per hour. Only a small number were available for operations in 1940, limiting its operational impact. Those that flew conducted night bombing missions against German targets with some effectiveness. Its potential was genuine. Its numbers were not sufficient to realize it.
The Farman F-222. The Farman F-222 was a large, four-engine heavy bomber of distinctly earlier character, featuring a high wing configuration and a fixed undercarriage that betrayed its 1930s origins. It was slow and vulnerable in daylight operations, but it flew early war bombing missions against German industrial targets at night, including one of the first Allied bombing raids on Berlin. Its limitations were clear, but it served in the roles assigned to it until more capable aircraft became available. The Bloch MB-210. The MB-210 was a twin-engine bomber that had been the backbone of French bomber aviation in the mid-1930s. By 1940, it was obsolete, slow, and poorly suited to contested airspace. It continued to fly night operations, where its vulnerability was less immediately fatal, and it served with Vichy forces in secondary theaters after the armistice. Its presence in the order of battle in 1940 illustrated the degree to which French bomber aviation had not yet completed its transition to modern equipment. The Breguet 693. The Breguet 693 was a twin-engine ground attack aircraft designed to operate at low altitude against enemy armor and troop concentrations. Powered by two Morane radials, it was fast enough for its role and carried a useful forward armament. It flew missions during the Battle of France against German armored columns, where it suffered heavy losses to ground fire and fighter interceptions. Its crews pressed their attacks with considerable determination, but the tactical situation in 1940 offered limited opportunity for sustained ground attack operations. The Potez 540. The Potez 540 was a multi-role monoplane of the early 1930s that had served as a bomber, transport, and colonial patrol aircraft. By 1940, it was thoroughly outdated, slow, and unprotected against modern fighter opposition. It continued to serve in secondary roles within French colonial forces, where the pace of operations and the nature of opposition made its limitations less immediately consequential. Its presence in wartime service was a reflection of how thinly French aviation resources were stretched. The Dewoitine D501 and D510. The D501 and D510 were monoplane fighters of the mid-1930s, powered by Hispano-Suiza engines and armed with a cannon firing through the propeller hub, an arrangement that was technically innovative for its era. By 1940, they were no longer frontline types, but they continued to serve in training and secondary roles. Some equipped Vichy colonial units, where they remained in service well beyond the period when any comparable air force would have retired them. The Nieuport-Delage NiD 622. The NiD 622 was a biplane fighter of the late 1920s, a sesquiplane design that had been a capable aircraft in its day. By the outbreak of war, it was entirely obsolete as a combat aircraft, serving only in training establishments and peripheral colonial postings. Its appearance in any accounting of French wartime aviation speaks to the breadth of equipment that remained nominally on strength, even as the modern war overtook it entirely. The Loire-46. The Loire-46 was a parasol-wing monoplane fighter, an intermediate design between the biplane era and the fully cantilevered monoplane. Powered by a Morane radial, it was used as a fighter in the mid-1930s and remained in secondary service into the early war years. Like many aircraft of its generation, it found itself relegated to training and colonial duties as the operational frontier moved beyond its capabilities. The Caudron C-714 Cyclone. The C-714 Cyclone was a lightweight fighter designed around an approach of aerodynamic cleanliness and reduced weight to achieve competitive speed from a modest engine. Powered by a Renault inline engine, it reached around 490 kilometers per hour. It was issued to Polish pilot units fighting under French command during the Battle of France, where it proved structurally fragile and mechanically unreliable under the demands of intensive combat operations. Its concept was sound in principle, its execution could not withstand the pressures of operational service. The Dewoitine D371 and D376. The D371 and D376 were parasol monoplane fighters that served with the Naval, the French naval air arm.
Designed for carrier and shore-based operations, they were powered by Gnome-Rhone radials and were broadly comparable to land-based fighters of the early 1930s. By 1939, they were obsolete as combat aircraft, but they remained in service with naval aviation units in various secondary capacities throughout the early war period. The Loire-Nieuport LN-401. The LN-401 was a carrier-based dive bomber operated by the Naval. Gull-winged and powered by a Hispano-Suiza engine, it was designed to conduct precision attacks against naval targets from the decks of French carriers. It flew combat missions during the Battle of France and in operations off the Norwegian coast, pressing attacks against German shipping and shore positions. Production numbers were limited and losses were significant, but the crews who flew it demonstrated a willingness to engage that the aircraft's performance did not always reward. The Vought 156F. France acquired the American Vought 156F as a naval dive bomber, a variant of the aircraft that served the United States Navy as the SB-2U Vindicator. Operated by the Naval from shore bases during the Battle of France, it flew attack missions against the advancing German army. It was not a young design by 1940, and its performance margins were not generous, but it represented the French Naval Air Arm's attempt to field a dedicated precision strike capability during the campaign. The Latécoère 298. The Latécoère 298 was a torpedo bomber float plane operated by the Naval, powered by a Hispano-Suiza engine and capable of carrying a torpedo beneath its fuselage. It was designed for maritime strike operations against enemy surface vessels. It flew missions during the Norwegian campaign and in the Mediterranean, demonstrating the determined operational tempo that characterized French naval aviation, even as circumstances deteriorated around it. After the armistice, it continued in Vichy service across North African coastal waters. The SNCASE SE-100. The SE-100 was a twin-engine heavy fighter conceived to escort bombers and conduct long-range interception. An ambitious and aerodynamically sophisticated design, it reached the prototype stage but did not enter production before the armistice ended French aircraft manufacturing under sovereign authority. It represents the category of French aviation development that the German occupation foreclosed, projects of genuine merit that ran out of time. The Arsenal VG-33. The Arsenal VG-33 was a lightweight fighter that achieved remarkable performance from a relatively modest Hispano-Suiza engine, approximately 558 kilometers per hour in testing. Constructed partly of wood to conserve strategic materials, it was fast, clean, and genuinely competitive. Only a handful were completed before the armistice. What the VG-33 demonstrated was that French designers, given time, were capable of producing fighters fully equal to the best of their contemporaries. Time was precisely what the campaign of 1940 did not allow. Free French operations and Allied aircraft. Following the armistice, French aviators who continued to fight did so largely in aircraft provided by Allied partners. Free French squadrons flew British Hurricanes, Spitfires, and Blenheims within the Royal Air Force structure, and later transitioned to American types, including the P-40 Warhawk, P-38 Lightning, and P-47 Thunderbolt as the war expanded. In North Africa and the Middle East, Free French and later Fighting French units flew alongside British and Commonwealth forces in virtually every theater where the RAF operated. The French identity of these squadrons was maintained through personnel, leadership, and tradition, even when the aircraft themselves bore no French origins.
Vichy French aviation. The aviation forces of Vichy France occupied a complex position, nominally neutral, operationally active in the defense of French colonial territory against both Allied and Axis encroachment. Vichy air units fought against British forces in Syria in 1941, against the Anglo-American landings in North Africa in November 1942, and maintained a presence across French West Africa and Indochina. The aircraft they flew were largely those inherited from the Armée de l'Air of 1940, D-520s,
MS-406s, Leo 451s, and H-75 Hawks, maintained under increasingly difficult conditions as spare parts and replacements became harder to obtain. When the Allied landings in North Africa prompted Germany to occupy the previously unoccupied zone of France, many Vichy units defected to the Allied cause, bringing their aircraft and their experience with them. The aircraft of French aviation during the Second World War tell a story defined by interrupted potential. The designs that France produced in the late 1930s were, at their best, genuinely competitive. The D-520, the Leo 451, the Arsenal VG-33 demonstrated that French aeronautical engineering remained at the frontier of what was possible. The problem was not conception, but completion. The gap between what was designed, what was ordered, and what was actually delivered and ready for combat when the storm broke in May 1940. What came after the armistice, the divided loyalties, the colonial campaigns, the Free French squadrons flying borrowed aircraft in every theater, revealed something that the defeat of 1940 had temporarily obscured. French airmen continued to fight, continued to adapt, and continued to contribute to the Allied cause with a professionalism that the chaos of their nation's circumstances could not extinguish. The aircraft changed, the determination did not.